Hello everybody, Gabrielle Lord here, and today we're doing a little something special than one of our usual videos. I'm a huge book lover, if you don't know, and I decided I would do a video on books as sort of a, this is going to be sort of a prelude to another video I'll be doing later this month before New Year's about books, all of the books that I've read this year. So instead of talking about books right now, we're going to be talking about authors. Some of my favorite authors of all time right now. So obviously this list might be irrelevant in a few years or a decade, more likely, because I'm more likely to change slower as I grow older, just like a lot of you people. So I guess we might as well get to that. I guess to set up the rules, for an author to be my favorite author, they need to have something that really hits me hard, really speaks to me. But for me personally, I have to have read more than one of their books for them to be considered my favorite author. Because obviously, some authors have drastically different writing styles for different books that they've released. Because you might have read their early work or their later work, and you haven't tried any of their other books, so you won't know. So that's basically my own rules for this list. So let's jump straight in to my top 10 favorite authors. It's going to be going from 10 to 1, so technically my least favorite authors at the start, but the least favorite of my favorites. So let's get into that. For number 10 is JRR Tolkien. He is, of course, probably one of the most famous authors, I guess, in most of the world. He was a British author, and he is famous for The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings trilogy. But, of course, he has such a huge and interesting story outside of just writing these. And obviously you should read about his life, or even watch the movie they made of it. It's a decent movie. He was in World War One. He participated in World War One. He was a very smart and educated man, and made the entire Orc and Elvish languages by himself, and just created this massive world. And he is like one of the biggest influences in the fantasy genre. I put him in number 10 because I respect him, I enjoy his work for the most part, and love what he did. In terms of, reading it and getting through it, it's not my absolute favorite to read casually. His stuff you need to take your time reading, and in some ways you need to use your brain a little bit more, because there's obviously a lot of old-timey words. Everything's written a bit more eloquently. Even The Hobbit, which is in some ways considered one of Tolkien's more kid-friendly works, at least that's sort of how he wrote it, compared to Lord of the Rings. Like, he sort of wrote Hobbit for kids, and Lord of the Rings was more for them as adults, or something along those lines. But of course there's multiple stories to hear about. And of course, other than Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, as you can see, there's also some of his other stuff that I picked up at certain points. His most famous book book outside of Lord of the Rings and Hobbit is The Silmarillion, which is not actually written by him because, well, not finished by him. He wrote everything in this book, but it was actually kind of finished, but compiled by his son, Christopher. As you can see, here it says edited by Christopher Tolkien. There's quite a lot of stuff of his released after the main books that will usually have Christopher's name on it, because there's a lot that Tolkien himself didn't release or finish before his death in 1973. So that's unfortunate. Something that's more so finished is a compilation of short stories by Tolkien. There's Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, Pearl and Sir Orfeo. The Green Knight, of course, you've probably heard of recently with the movie that came out. It doesn't have much to do with Tolkien, I guess, and probably isn't considered a Tolkien adaptation. But I've heard good things about it. I haven't seen it myself, but who knows. But yeah, that's Tolkien. I actually have up on my shelf, it's like, you can actually probably see it. It's very big and not like as traditional story or stories like all of these. It up there is a complete history of Middle Earth, and that was a gift I got, and it's a wonderful gift. It's treated and written as a history book, even though it's a history of a fantasy world, a fictional world, and yet it looks, I haven't read much of it, but it seems like, it's treated like it's real, and that's kind of how Tolkien wrote all of this. He treated it as a real world, and that's what kind of makes Middle Earth special. For number 9 is Ursula K. Le Guin, who is famous for writing the Earthsea series, which is unfortunately the only books of hers that I own. I have only really heard about her in the last couple of years, which is unfortunate, but what I have read of hers is pretty good. She is pretty close to Tolkien, you could say. In some ways she's the female Tolkien, but that's a very basic way of thinking about it, a very basic way to say it. But it is, said on the back here. You probably can't read it, but it does say that, her work is as treasured as much as Tolkien or his friend C.S. Lewis, who was famous for writing Narnia. But, there's sadly not much I can really say, because I'm not too much of an intellectual reader, or at least a intellectual intellectual critic. But as I said, she's famous for writing the Earthsea series, which is very good. It's interesting because it's like a landmark for a lot of things in fantasy, sort of like what Tolkien did do, because it's one of the few fantasy stories of the time, which was let's see here, the 60s, which is when Tolkien's work really took off. In the 60s, there weren't really fantasy stories that had a dark-skinned lead, because that's what one of many things her work is known for, being diverse in a good way, a really good way, especially for the time, because she, went against, traditional book norms, and all of her other stuff, from what I've heard, is no different. So yeah, you can definitely check her out. So there's A Wizard of Earthsea and The Tombs of Atuan. Haven't picked up any of her other books in the series, but I hope to soon. So this is almost more of an honorable mention. But so far, she's given a strong impression. And here, in a big stack, is number 8, Stephen King. This is yet another famous one. I put a lot of the famous ones at the bottom of the list because, again, I respect these authors very much, but I would like to give more credit to the somewhat lesser known authors, but also because I've just decided that what they write is good, but I'm like more into some of the other stuff. King is one of the earliest big authors that I really read when I was younger. Like many of you, well, people who were previously kids out there probably also read King at a young age when you probably weren't supposed to. But I really liked him when I was younger. I haven't read too much more of his work since this could have been a huge, even bigger pile if I was really into his work, but I still like his work well enough. So of course, you got his absolutely famous work like The Shining, and its sequel, Dr. Sleep. Then you got It, which is next to Shining his like most famous book. This cover is kind of, it's not that good. I'm happy it's at least not like a movie cover promoting one of the newer movies, but could be better. I've seen better covers. Then The Shawshank Redemption, which is not his most famous book, but is at least famous for the movie adaptation with Morgan Freeman. Then you got Misery. It's probably one of my favorite stories, at least one of my favorites to be adapted. I really love the movie with Kathy Bates and James Caan. Rest in peace, James Caan. And then, of course, you got some of his more new stuff, like this compilation, If It Bleeds, which actually includes one of the stories is being turned into a movie for Netflix. Mr. Harrigan's Phone. Yes, Mr. Harrigan's Phone. That's being turned into a movie. His son wrote a short story of his own, which got turned into a movie recently, Black Phone, which I have not seen, but looks good. Then finally, The Institution, which I have not read yet, but I'm hoping it's good. It's probably one of his beefier books. Next to It, I forget every now and then because of how short it is, but it's like 1,000 pages actually, and this is, let's see, quick here. That's the author's notes. Okay, 557 pages. Okay, so it's just because it's a hardcover and taller, so it looks bigger, but it is 1,000 pages over. One of the first books I've ever read that it was 1,000 pages. Obviously, being young, I skimmed through a lot, so that's how I got through it. In some ways, it'd be hard for me today to do that, but I can manage. So that's like all of my Stephen King stuff. At some point, I might get more stuff. There's still plenty of his more popular stuff that I haven't read yet, but I've seen movies for, like Christine, Carrie, and Salem's Lot. But yeah, that's Stephen King. I hope to read more of this and even reread some of the stuff that I've already read in the past. But yeah, that's the master of horror himself. I can call him that, but there's definitely some other really good horror writers. This is number, 7. Andrzej Sapkowski. This is yet another one where I just have read all of his main series, which is The Witcher, which is of course famous for both the video game series by CG Project Red, and also the Netflix series previously starring Henry Cavill. I don't know if Sapkowski has really written a whole lot other than these, but who knows, maybe he has. But these are some great books. I put Sapkowski at number 7 because there's a lot of other good authors on this list, but also because in some ways I like elements of the games a bit more than these, but I still respect the hell out of these books for creating Geralt and all of the other characters that are so well known in the series. There are 8 books in total, from The Last Wish all the way to Season of Storms. Now, unfortunately, I have not read Season of Storms yet because I got really busy, but also because I realized that this was actually the final book, but this is like some sort of continuation of sorts. That and this came out like 16 years after this, so I guess Sapkowski just decided that he wanted to continue it at least one more time. Who knows? I'll read this at some point. I am planning at the start of January to listen to the audiobook version of Last Wish because I wanted to revisit these stories. And I already, downloaded the audiobook of The Last Wish on Audible. And so yeah, if that one is good, I might just listen to audiobook versions of all of these, including Season of Storms. But for now, this is all I've done. I've read almost all of them except for this one. And they're all pretty good. I would say that the series is at its best with the first 4 books, that being Last Wish, Sword of Destiny, Blood of Elves, and The Time of Contempt. I'm not saying that the other books are bad. I just prefer the early ones more. It may be because they don't... Sapkowski doesn't take so much time with most of the main characters split, trying to get to one another, reunite, and lots of bad things are happening. Not saying that bad things shouldn't happen to main characters, or conflict shouldn't happen, because it makes their victory much more greater. There's just moments where I feel like I would like Sapkowski to not linger on some characters suffering a bit more, including that mainly goes for Ciri, who is like the second sort of main character, or becomes sort of the main character in the later books. But oh well, that's just my opinion. Sometimes I'm a soft soul, and other times I'm not. This was one of the few times where I'm kind of soft soul. That's because I feel like, in a day like this, I should do trigger warnings. There is sexual assault in these books, at least in the later half. So if you're wanting to read these, like if you've heard of The Witcher and felt you should read these before you watch the Netflix series, you should. But if you're not really into reading depictions of sexual assault, don't read the later books. But I will say you will enjoy the story, the overall story of The Witcher. Maybe the Netflix series or the video games will be more up your speed, because there's a little less of that. It's kind of there, but not as prevalent. But oh well. This is a really hefty stack, but you should definitely read these. I'll try not to drop these. Number 6 is Gabrielle Lord. Gabrielle Lord. who is, well, I don't know about fame because I haven't done a ton of research on her, but I know her well for the Conspiracy 365 series. She's an Australian author, so a lot of you guys who are a lot of people are probably American, likely wouldn't know her. Obviously, these books were released in the U.S. and I read them. At first, I read them when I was younger, and then finally bought the rest of the books and read them last year, and I really like them. Her writing style is basic. These books are written from a first person point of view, and it's a decent use of that point of view. I think what's so great about these books for me is how intense they get, because I don't know how it would be for you guys if you read these, but for me it got pretty intense to the point where my heart was pounding, wondering what would happen to these characters. And even though these books are mainly written for kids, there was still that intensity that a book for adults would give you. Like, you're almost thinking that these characters aren't going to make it, even though you would probably want to end your book with a happy ending if it's, intended for kids, especially now. Obviously, books that are considered kids' books, that were written many decades ago, aren't, what you would consider kids' books. Think classic fairy tales, Grimm's fairy tales. Those are technically for kids, but they're still pretty dark. But yeah, that's all I have to say. I could have put her lower on the list, but I really liked her work. Maybe I'll look out for something else. It doesn't seem she's written too much after that. But check these books out if you can. Maybe I'll do a video on them. But that's it. For number 5 on my offer list is Makoto Yukimura. That's how it's spelled and pronounced. Who is the author of Vinland Saga. I know this is a manga series and a manga author, but I felt he was worthy of being on this list, and there is another manga author on this list, and you'll find out who. But I started reading this manga earlier this year and have really enjoyed it. I only have the first 4 volumes, which I'm pretty sure which is what all that's adapted into the first season of the anime. And seeing how season 2 was announced, I was prompted to read these because I had a feeling that I could get through the entire manga series before the anime would really get past season 2. And I hadn't really done that because I usually am an anime guy, because manga is harder and more expensive to collect because there's just so much more usually, except for some manga series that are much shorter. Vinland Saga itself is definitely a great series. It's a fantastic war manga. It's not like full of overpowered guns in a semi-modern world. It's it's involving the different northern cultures, like the Nordic, the Swedish, a few others, but also including the English and even the Romans, I believe. But it's basically the idea of like the Vikings, which is not really the name of their culture, any of the cultures in this story, but obviously an idea or term for pillaging or traveling, something like that. This is a great series. I definitely recommend it. I guess, like with Witcher, I might as well give a light trigger warning. There's also bits of sexual assault in this series. As far as I can tell, little bits of it. It's not as prevalent, but it's still there, which makes sense with a war story like this, especially an older war story centuries ago. But the art is very good. It's a little harder to judge the writing for slightly more visual type of medium, but I still think the writing is good. The characters are really good, and I can't wait to read the rest of the series. And haven't really seen much of this guy's other work, but I might try to seek it out. I think there was a quote somewhere, or something on the back of one of the things that mentions what he's done for. Okay, so the acclaimed author of Planets. So he wrote something called Planets, so I might look out for that if I can, and I recommend these to you, especially if you're a manga fan. Number 4 on the list is Leia Bardugo, and she's not like completely obscure as far as I know, even though I did say a lot of the authors on the top part of the list would be more obscure, but oh well, I'm not always good with words. She is well known for the most part. She is a young adult author, I guess you could say, because her books have been seen in, well, I've seen her books in the young adult section, but it doesn't completely have the problems or stigmas that young adult books have, like Twilight, because that's what you think of when you think of a young adult novel. But I like her work. Now, I've only read these last 2 books of hers, but I am about to, next month, try reading her other 2 works. One of them being her real first and most famous novel and series, Shadow and Bone, which is part of the Grisha trilogy. And then another book of hers that I bought from an antique shop, actually, or a thrift shop, actually. The Language of Thorns is supposed to be sort of a compilation of tales, I believe. And then finally, the duology of books that I actually have read and really liked, which is the Six of Crows duology. I think these are a bit more famous and a little better, it seems, or at least that's what some people say. I really like these books, but it seems a lot of people who've read her work prefer these. But yeah, I mean, that's all I can say. I would definitely recommend the Six of Crows duology the most, especially if you're more into action or deep characters, because it seems from what I've heard that Six of Crows has more of that than her other work, but I just wanted to have her other work and eventually read it for the sake of doing so and seeing how she progresses as an author. But yeah, I can recommend these 2 books more, so go check them out. I think they have audiobooks, and I'm pretty sure they actually have multiple actors in them instead of one narrator, but from what I've heard, it's the actress narrating the chapter instead of just voicing the characters, which is a little weird, but oh well, I probably won't listen to the audiobook, but you can totally do so if you're not as into books, or at least reading them or taking the time for whatever reason. But if you can, definitely read these 2. Number 3 is Hiromu Arakawa, who is famous for the Full Metal Alchemist series, another manga author. Sadly, I haven't read all of these, but I have watched the anime, both the original and Brotherhood. But from what I can tell and what I've heard, the manga has been adapted very well, at least for Brotherhood. So it's not like I'm missing a whole bunch by not buying the other books. But these are definitely really good. And I wanted to give her a shout out, especially because I guess I don't want to, be that guy who grandstands about it, but I would say that there aren't a whole bunch of female manga art authors, but she's definitely one of them, and she does a really great job. I guess another funny and famous thing about her is that she hasn't ever shown her face, and her avatar is like a chibi style cow, which is a little funny, not gonna lie. I think maybe shown somewhere, I'm not sure. Yep. Okay, it's right here. Yeah, you can see that. It's a little funny. I thought so. But, yeah, I definitely recommend her work. But if you don't have the time, definitely check out Full Metal Alchemist, the anime. Probably Brotherhood if you want the more accurate adaptation. Okay, so you thought the other stack was hefty. This is quite hefty. Number 2 on the offer list is Clive Cussler. Like some of the runner-ups on this list, I just started reading his work, but man, were some of the ones I've read really good, to the point where I already have a bunch of books. I'm going to mention this in my books I've read in 2022 video, but I started by reading this one over here, Golden Buddha, as I was on a family trip, and there's a family member who had like a box full of books that she was wanting to give away, see if we wanted to take anything. I looked for them, and I took out 2. One of them was Hannibal by Thomas Harris, and then the other one was Golden Buddha, because my dad had read Cussler's work before, and I knew that because I'd often see him outside reading one of the books, and it looked pretty cool, and he, sometimes talked about how good they were, and both the covers of the ones he had and this one gave me like kind of Indiana Jones vibes, so I decided to read this one and loved it. And then I moved on to his more popular series and character, Dirt Pit. And obviously most of these are Dirt Pit books, because that has the most Indiana Jones type of vibe. One character, one big main character, going on big adventures, usually discovering a treasure or stopping an evil plan. It's good stuff. And then these 3 over here are part of different series. And obviously Golden Buddha is one of those, part of the Oregon Files. Both of these are part of that series. And then this one up top is part of both the Numa Files and the Kurt Austin series. I haven't read this one or the next Oregon Files, but I assume they're all really great. I would also recommend these if you like adventures, contemporary sort of adventures. well, I'd say contemporary, because most of these are set in the time period they were written in. A lot of these were written in the 80s. Well, first the early 70s, then throughout the 80s, and then so forth. Only a few of these I have are from the last few years. Some of the last books Cussler sadly wrote because he died in 2020. So it is a little sad that I've only just now gotten his work after he passed. But I guess that's with a lot of authors, but sometimes that just is sad and hits hard a bit. But again, I'd recommend these books. And I'm gonna also take this big stack back to where they were. Finally, at number 1 for my favorite authors list is Rick Riordan, who is the writer of the Percy Jackson series and a bunch of other kids' fantasy books set within different mythologies, like Egyptian and Norse, but this one is about the Greek mythology, and specifically one boy, Percy Jackson, who was being chased after by monsters, and kind of persecuted a bit because by gods and monsters, because he is one of the sons of the big three Greek gods, even after they made a pact not to have any more kids. So that's basically the sort of gist of the plot. But Percy goes on adventures with his friends who are also demigods, and they try to stop the main bad guys. One of them being Kronos, the father of the father of all of the main Greek gods, specifically Zeus himself. I think this is a great series. It's definitely a great alternative to Harry Potter. Whether you've read Harry Potter already and want to jump onto another series that's similar, or you just don't want to read Harry Potter out of principle with J.K. Rowling, which is understandable enough, and you want to read something similar, this is a great way to get rid of that itch. Now, I'm trying to think, what would make this guy like my favorite author, other than me just really enjoying these books. Obviously, they're accessible enough. They probably have the longest chapters in my whole list of books by most of these authors for the most part, aside from Sapkowski, who has the longest chapters actually. But chapter pages don't count for whether or not the book is good. This is another great example of good perspective writing for the first person perspective. I also kind of like how relatable Percy is, even if he also happens to have both dyslexia and ADHD. But I would also think those elements would make him more relatable to other people, and I'm sure a lot of readers love these books for that reason, which makes sense because apparently the author wrote Percy like this for his son, inspired by his son for the most part, which I think is really sweet. These are all really great books. He's currently writing a new one, actually, which is surprising, which is probably going to come out next year, I believe. So it'll be great to see that after I finish the final one. Unfortunately, I'm all stuck on the fourth one just because I've got other stuff to do. But excited to see where the final book goes and how it sets up the next book. At some point I'll try to read Riordan's other books. I'm sure they're just as good. And let's not forget that Percy Jackson's going to get a TV adaptation on Disney Plus in 2024. Hopefully it's actually good compared to the first time they tried to adapt Percy Jackson. It did not go too well. So I hope they get that right. And that's my list of top 10 favorite authors. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you liked all the options I gave myself. Don't know why I did it like that. Anyways, let me know in the comments down below what your favorite authors are. It doesn't have to be one, obviously. It can be 10, in fact. You can pick 10 or you can pick 5, however many you want. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Hope you enjoy this video. Hope you subscribe, like this video, and maybe even share it. Probably not, but I will. And I hope you all have a great day.